and have committed to do it for President Trump. We flexed all resources the FBI had and surged multiple air assets as soon as this shooting occurred. We were cycling in agents, evidence response technicians, hostage rescue technicians, and special operators in and out of Utah, cycling evidence back and forth on these FBI planes as soon as we could so that there was no delay.
In any critical incident, there are two timelines. There is the timeline of events as they actually occurred, a sequence of objective facts. And then there is the timeline of the narrative, the story told to the public. The investigation is supposed to bridge the gap between the two, but what happens when, from the very first hour, that bridge is never built? They told the public the case was closed before the smoke even cleared. Within hours, Tyler Robinson was in custody, his name and face broadcast across every network, a symbol of swift, decisive justice. The official story was clean, simple, and reassuring. A threat was identified, caught, and neutralized. The system, we were told, had worked, but our job as forensic investigators is not to accept the story. It is to deconstruct it piece by piece and test its integrity against the physical evidence. And in this case, the story and the evidence do not align. In fact, they are in direct opposition. The foundational problem is this. The rifle authorities claim Tyler Robinson used could not have fired the bullet recovered from the scene. Let's be precise here. This is not a matter of opinion or interpretation. It is a matter of science, ballistics analysis. The unique fingerprint a firearm leaves on a projectile showed a complete mismatch. The trajectory calculations did not line up with the suspect's alleged position. The witness accounts, when examined without bias, do not point to him. Procedurally, any one of these discrepancies should have triggered a pause, a reassessment. Instead, officials doubled down, cementing their initial narrative. But truth has a way of fracturing even the most carefully constructed stories. Testimonies once thought buried are resurfacing. Eyewitnesses who were silenced are finding the courage to speak. Internal reports, once sealed, are now being leaked. And every new piece of information points to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Tyler Robinson may have been the man presented in cuffs, but the evidence suggests he was never the man behind the trigger. And if that is true, it opens up two far more disturbing questions. Who did pull the trigger? And who worked so diligently to ensure we would never look in their direction? Before we analyze the suspicions in the case, please let me know where you saw this video. I will read it all and spread it around the world. And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel to be the first to receive notifications when there are new videos. The incident itself unfolded at a high-profile event, a public speech by Charlie Kirk. By definition, this was an environment under heightened security. Cameras, trained personnel, crowd control, a supposedly impenetrable perimeter. Yet, within seconds, protocol was shattered by the sound of a reported shot. Panic became the primary response, and security personnel swarmed the area with an urgency that seemed to override clarity. And out of this chaos, a resolution was produced with extraordinary speed. Tyler Robinson was in custody. But look at what was missing. There was no formal press conference detailing the arrest, no release of verified evidence, no preliminary forensic breakdown for the public. There was just a name and a mugshot, presented not as a suspect in an ongoing investigation, but as the conclusion to the event. The public wasn't asked to consider his guilt. They were informed of it. News outlets, fueled by official releases, ran with this pre-packaged narrative before investigators on the ground could complete even the most basic procedures. There were no confirmed witness identifications released to the press, no surveillance footage shown, no verified motive established. Why the rush? An arrest based on pressure rather than proof serves a different function. When a high-profile figure is targeted, the system demands a villain to absorb public fear and anger. Tyler Robinson was, in that sense, a convenient solution. His personal history could be easily molded into a plausible motive. His face fit a certain profile. His past record became the cornerstone of the case, displacing the need for actual, physical evidence from the scene. No one in an official capacity seemed to be asking the critical questions. Was he even in a viable position to take the shot? How does one explain the irreconcilable ballistic evidence? Who else was seen fleeing the area in the immediate aftermath? Instead, a villain was packaged and delivered. But here is a fundamental principle of investigation. When the facts of the case do not support the arrest, then the arrest itself becomes a piece of misinformation. The first and most undeniable crack in this official story wasn't a recanted confession or a new witness. It was pure, unassailable science. The ballistics report on the recovered round was definitive. The barrel markings, the caliber, the entire ballistic signature were entirely inconsistent with the weapon attributed to Tyler Robinson. This should have changed everything. A mismatch of this magnitude is a red flag that signals one of two things. The investigation is either fundamentally misdirected or critically incomplete. Yet, in this case, nothing stopped, nothing was paused, nothing was reconsidered. What's more, sources suggest that individuals within the system are aware of this forensic discrepancy. They've acknowledged it quietly, off the record, unwilling to go public, but also unwilling to deny it in private. This raises a crucial question. If the core piece of physical evidence exonerates a suspect, why would that suspect remain in custody? Why hold a person when the science of the crime scene actively separates them from the act itself? The answer appears to be a strategic one. Keeping Tyler Robinson in custody didn't solve the case, but it did preserve the official narrative. It maintained public calm, allowed authorities to project an image of progress, and most importantly, it may have protected whoever was truly responsible. By keeping the spotlight fixed on Robinson, any other trail was allowed to go cold. When an event happens in a crowd, the official eyes, the cameras, the security, are not the only ones watching. And on that day, private citizens saw things that were never integrated into the official record. 3 separate spectators provided consistent, independent statements that the shot did not originate from ground level. They described its origin as from above. They detailed the perceived angle, the direction of the sound, and the immediate reactions of the people around them. One was so certain that he repeated it multiple times to the first responding officers. It came from higher up. Another witness reported seeing distinct movement on a nearby rooftop just seconds after the shot. Not a panicked scramble, but a single, lone figure retreating from view. This critical detail never appeared in any official briefing. Then came the most unsettling acoustic account. A bystander who insisted they heard 2 distinct firing sources. They were clear it was not an echo or sound distortion, but 2 separate reports that could not have come from a single weapon. These were not anonymous internet rumors. These were formal statements, taken on the record by law enforcement. So where did they go? The records show they were effectively neutralized. Some were marked as incomplete. Others were dismissed as inconsistent, despite their similarities. At least one was allegedly misfiled, and another was redacted entirely before it could reach internal review. In a normal investigation, conflicting eyewitness accounts are a signal to broaden the search for truth. Here, they were used to narrow it. Instead of looking up, the investigation looked away. One must ask, if what people on the ground saw and heard contradicts the official story, is the problem witness confusion, or is it evidence suppression? The security posture for an event like this has a standard playbook. Elevated surveillance, rooftop spotters, aerial monitoring, and thorough perimeter sweeps. On the day Charlie Kirk was targeted, these safeguards were either disregarded or deliberately omitted. There were no assigned rooftop units, not a single trained observer positioned on any of the numerous accessible vantage points surrounding the venue. Despite it being routine for gatherings of this size, there were no drones providing overhead monitoring, no secondary eyes in the sky, no aerial feed, no thermal tracking. Then there is the anomaly of the suspect's location. The spot where authorities apprehended Tyler Robinson was almost too convenient, a place where cameras and responders could converge on him instantly. Yet this location was nowhere near the elevated position multiple witnesses described as the source of the shot. The most jarring piece of forensic evidence, or lack thereof, was the gunshot residue, GSR, test. Tyler Robinson did not test positive for GSR in a manner consistent with recently firing a weapon. The trace findings were minimal, not at all what forensic science would expect from an active shooter. The physical markers simply were not there. So we are left with a series of troubling questions. Was the absence of standard overhead security a simple lapse in planning, or was it a calculated omission designed to leave a critical vantage point unmonitored? Was Tyler Robinson's position a coincidence, or was it carefully staged? Either way, the security failure that day wasn't just a breach, it was an opening. And someone clearly benefited from it being there. When the forensic specialists completed their analysis of the recovered projectile, the official story should have collapsed. The fact that the caliber did not match the weapon linked to Tyler Robinson wasn't a small detail. It meant the round came from a completely different class of firearm. That single fact should have forced a complete overhaul of the investigation. Instead, something else happened. The very specialists who conducted that initial pivotal analysis were quietly reassigned from the case. There was no public explanation, no official acknowledgement. Their inconvenient scientific reports were not corrected or re-examined. They were buried. Then came the sealing of the ballistics data itself. This data, which is standard material for pre-trial discovery, was locked away, with the official reason being to protect the integrity of the investigation. But protecting it from whom? Even Robinson's own public defender posed the obvious question. If the bullet doesn't match his client's weapon, why is he still being held? And more importantly, why is the hard, exculpatory evidence being hidden instead of being used to clear his name? When a piece of forensic evidence definitively rules out a suspect, it should end the argument. In this case, it only revealed the agenda. Because if the man they charged is the wrong man, it leaves only one unanswered question. Who was the real subject being shielded by this investigation, and why? The most revealing details in this case have not come from official press releases, but from those working behind the scenes. A member of the security team admitted off the record that a second individual was briefly detained immediately after the incident. This person was not processed, not photographed, not logged in any official chain of custody. He was questioned off the record and then released without any documentation. No name, no description, no follow-up. He simply became a ghost. Then there was a vendor, stationed near a restricted access point, who claimed to have seen a man exiting through a staff-only doorway moments after the chaos erupted. The man wasn't panicked or being escorted. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going and how to avoid drawing attention. That witness statement was taken, and then it, too, vanished from the official record. None of this, the second detainee, the alternate suspect, the unauthorized exit from a secure perimeter, was ever mentioned publicly. The narrative remained clean. One suspect, one arrest, one story. But when the accounts of people inside the operation begin to directly contradict the story being told to the public, the problem is no longer misinformation, it's systematic omission, and omissions of this magnitude do not happen by accident. The official record of an investigation should be a complete document, a meticulous accounting of every lead, every witness, and every individual detained. But in this case, the record contains ghosts, figures who appeared, were interacted with, and then were systematically erased from the official chain of custody. According to a member of the security team, a second individual was briefly detained in the immediate chaos following the incident. This person wasn't processed, photographed, or logged. They were questioned off the record and then released without any documentation. No name, no description, no follow-up. They exist only in the memory of an insider, a phantom in the official timeline. Simultaneously, a vendor stationed near a restricted access point provided a statement. They saw a man exiting through a staff-only doorway just moments after the event. His demeanor was not one of panic. He wasn't being escorted. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who knew the layout, who knew the escape route, and who knew how to avoid attention. That formal witness statement was taken, and then it, too, vanished into the case file's void. None of this, the secondary detainment, the alternate suspect, the secure perimeter breach, ever appeared in a press release. The narrative presented to the public remained surgically clean. One suspect, one arrest, one story. But when first-hand accounts from within the operation directly contradict the public narrative, the issue ceases to be one of misinformation. It becomes one of deliberate strategic omission, and omissions of this scale are never accidental. The official story places Tyler Robinson at the scene, poised to act. But the timeline, the single most critical element in any criminal reconstruction, tells an entirely different story. Multiple attendees reported seeing him on the opposite side of the venue just minutes before the incident, not near the speaker's platform, not in a concealed position, but walking openly, his behavior inconsistent with someone preparing an attack. This human intelligence is then corroborated by a digital footprint. At the exact moment the shot was heard, cellular data placed Robinson's device outside the immediate line of fire, pinging a tower from a different section of the venue. The distance was significant enough to raise serious mathematical doubts about his physical ability to have been the shooter. In any legitimate investigation, this combination of eyewitness accounts and corroborating digital evidence would force an immediate pause. It is a powerful, potential alibi. Yet just as these details should have fractured the case against him, another piece of the puzzle emerged, one that suggests the silencing of evidence was as crucial as its collection. The surveillance footage covering the exact area where witnesses placed Robinson went dark. Not the entire system, but a single crucial segment tracking that specific section. The recording gap aligns almost perfectly with the narrow window of the incident. The pattern is too precise to ignore. Human witnesses place him away from the scene. His phone data supports their accounts, and the only camera that could have provided definitive verification conveniently stopped recording. In a transparent investigation, this convergence of anomalies would trigger alarms. Here, it was met with silence. Initially, Tyler Robinson's legal defense followed a predictable and logical path. They challenged the accusation, demanded the release of evidence, and pushed for a dismissal based on the scientifically irrefutable ballistic mismatch. But then, the strategy shifted in a way that legal analysts find deeply troubling. Instead of aggressively attacking the clear weaknesses of the prosecution's case, his legal team began steering towards a different argument entirely, one of mental capacity and mitigation. They were no longer arguing his innocence. They were preparing for damage control. This pivot is a significant red flag. Procedurally, when hard evidence like ballistics separates a client from the crime, a defense team goes on the offensive. They file motions for disclosure. They push for immediate release. They expose the inconsistencies in open court. But here, the argument turned passive, focusing on psychological evaluations and quiet, closed-door negotiations. The question this raises is stark. What kind of pressure could cause a defense team to abandon its strongest evidence? Were they offered a deal that traded the truth for a more lenient outcome? Or were they given a warning that pushing too hard on the facts would expose something far more complex than a simple wrongful arrest? Those close to the case have noted the change. The legal strategy is no longer about clearing his name. It's about containing him. They are not dismantling the official narrative. They are learning to work around it. And when a lawyer stops fighting the evidence, it often means the evidence threatens someone far more powerful than their client. When official reports fall silent, the truth often begins to leak from the periphery, through whispers from those on the inside. A source with federal contacts hinted at a term that recontextualizes the entire case: placeholder suspect. Let us be clear about what this term implies. A placeholder is not a suspect who is wrongly accused due to a mistake. A placeholder is a strategic tool, an individual intentionally placed at the center of an investigation to absorb public scrutiny and media attention, allowing the real trail to go cold while a narrative is solidified. This theory is reinforced by another source, who revealed that Tyler Robinson's name was being circulated internally as the primary suspect before the crucial ballistic review was even completed. In other words, the suspect was chosen before the evidence was analyzed. Even more telling is the wall of silence built around the initial investigation. 2 officers connected to the early stages have declined to speak publicly. The reason given is not that they are unsure of the facts, but that they are reportedly bound by non-disclosure agreements. An NDA is a tool of corporate and intelligence worlds. It is highly unusual for patrol officers discussing a standard arrest. They are necessary only when the story is anything but standard. These are not unsubstantiated rumors. They are controlled feeds from individuals who understand the difference between an investigative error and a managed narrative. When insiders are forced to whisper instead of testify, it's not because the truth is unclear. It's because the truth is being actively controlled. If Tyler Robinson did not fire the shot, the focus of the investigation must pivot from simple blame to deliberate design. Someone still orchestrated the event, and someone benefited from the precise way it unfolded. The official story relies on the simple idea of a lone attacker with an unclear motive. But when the evidence disconnects the accused from the act, the motive becomes an untethered ghost. What then remains? Some insiders believe the objective was never a casualty, but the creation of chaos itself. Others theorize the true target wasn't the person on stage, but the wave of fear that would follow, a message sent without a traceable sender. And then there is the most unsettling possibility, the one no one wants to say aloud, that the event was a performance, never intended to end in a legitimate prosecution. Without a confirmed shooter, every theory gains credibility. Was this a staged threat designed to justify new policies or expanded security powers? Or was a genuine attempt made, with the wrong man conveniently used to close the file before more difficult questions could surface? The most uncomfortable truth is that the official story only holds together as long as no one keeps asking who actually pulled the trigger. The moment that question remains alive, the entire narrative collapses. Because if Tyler Robinson didn't do it, someone else did, and that someone has remained invisible while he carries the weight of the accusation. The case was delivered as a finished script, but it is now clear that the evidence itself is the harshest critic. The deeper this case is examined, the more it resembles not a flawed investigation, but an act of narrative maintenance, a story held together by force, because letting it fall apart would point to someone else entirely. And when a story requires this level of protection, it is never the truth that is being guarded. It's the people behind it. The evidence that should have cleared him was buried. The testimonies that could have redirected the search were ignored, and the official story that named him the shooter was protected more aggressively than the truth itself. His phone data breaks the timeline. The footage that could have exonerated him is conveniently gone. The witnesses who saw something different were not just overlooked, they were silenced. Shutting a case quickly looks cleaner than solving it accurately. But if he didn't fire that shot, then someone else walked away while the cameras focused on the wrong man. And this means the real question is not whether Tyler Robinson is innocent. The question is, who needed him to look guilty? Until that question is confronted, this case is not closed, it is concealed. Thanks for watching. How do you feel about these arguments and theories? Does it give you a different perspective on the case? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the latest notifications.